Welcome to Starbound Valor HFY. Subscribe now and dive into daily epic sci-fi adventures where humanity always rises. The Galactic Council Chamber was built to inspire fear. It floated in deep space, surrounded by thousands of stars, like a throne above the universe itself. Massive crystal pillars glowed with cold blue light. Dozens of alien species filled the high seats, their eyes fixed on the center platform. Today was not a day for debate. It was a day for judgment. At the center stood a single human, bound by energy restraints, standing on a raised execution platform. He looked small compared to the towering alien guards around him, but he stood straight, his head held high. To the council, humans were nothing special. They were new, young, and loud. A species that fought among itself, divided by borders and beliefs. Primitive compared to the ancient races of the galaxy. The council had allowed humans limited contact, but never full membership. Humans were watched, studied, and judged as weak. This human in chains was proof, at least in their minds. One life meant nothing in a galaxy of trillions. The charges were read in a language translated instantly for all. The human had crossed a restricted system. He had carried information the council did not approve of. They called it treason against galactic order. In truth, he had been a messenger. A quiet observer. Someone who asked questions the council did not like. That alone was enough. The council believed fear was the best lesson. A public execution would send a clear message to humanity. Obey, or suffer the same fate. The human listened without interruption. His face showed no panic. No anger. No begging. That unsettled some of the younger alien delegates, though they did not speak. His eyes moved slowly across the chamber, studying the faces watching him die. Reptilian eyes. Insect eyes. Cold artificial lenses. He memorized them, not with hatred, but with calm focus. It was the look of someone who had already accepted the outcome. The execution device hovered above him, a ring of dark metal filled with glowing energy. Once activated, it would end his life instantly, leaving nothing behind. Clean. Efficient. The council preferred it that way. The High Arbiter leaned forward, its voice echoing through the chamber. It asked the human if he had any final words. The question was ritual, not kindness. No one expected anything meaningful from a dying human. For a moment, the human said nothing. Then he slowly raised his head. His voice was calm, steady, and clear as it carried across the chamber. You have no idea what you just started. There was no shouting. No threat in his tone. Just a simple statement of fact. Silence followed, then laughter. Several council members produced sounds of amusement. To them, it was pathetic. A final attempt to sound important. The idea that one human life could change anything was absurd. The High Arbiter dismissed the words with a gesture. The execution was approved. The guards stepped back. The energy ring began to glow brighter. Power levels rose. The human closed his eyes, not in fear, but in peace. Somewhere deep within his clothing, unseen by alien scanners, a device no larger than a grain of sand completed its final sequence. It did not transmit loudly. It did not announce itself. It simply sent a signal, older than the council realized, deeper than their sensors could reach. The execution activated. In a flash of light, the human was gone. No scream. No body. Just empty space where he had stood. The council chamber remained silent for a moment, as tradition required. Judgment had been delivered. Order had been preserved. But something felt wrong. The stars outside the chamber seemed dimmer, as if the universe itself had paused. No alarms sounded. No systems failed. Yet an unnatural stillness spread through the vast hall. Even the laughter had stopped. Some delegates shifted uneasily in their seats, though none understood why. Far away, beyond mapped space, ancient machines awakened. Human-made stations, hidden in dark regions of the galaxy, received the signal. A simple code, passed down through generations. One that had never been used before. The code meant only one thing. A human had been executed by a foreign power. On distant worlds, human observers lifted their heads as alerts appeared on silent screens. Military commanders paused mid-sentence. Scientists stopped their work. There was no panic, no shouting, just understanding. The message spread quietly, efficiently, across human space. Back in the council chamber, the High Arbiter prepared to move on to the next matter of business. As far as the council was concerned, the problem of humanity had been handled. They did not notice the subtle shift in long-range sensors. They did not see fleets beginning to move in the dark. The chamber lights returned to normal. The crystal pillars glowed as they always had. The universe appeared unchanged. The council believed the matter was finished. At that moment, unknown to them, humanity had already been alerted. The council believed the execution had solved a problem. In their long history, fear had always worked. Younger species learned quickly when shown power. The death of one human was meant to be a warning, nothing more. As the chamber returned to normal, the High Arbiter began speaking of trade routes and border disputes. To them, humanity was already finished as a concern. They did not understand that they had judged humans using the wrong measure. Humans had never tried to impress the galaxy. They never showed their full strength. They avoided large fleets, loud displays, and political games. To the council, this looked like weakness. In truth, it was choice. Humans had learned long ago that showing power too early only invited enemies. So they watched. They listened. They recorded everything. Deep within council archives, marked as unimportant, were reports about human behavior. Most council members had never read them. Those who had dismissed them as irrelevant. The reports spoke of a species that reacted slowly, but completely. A species that did not strike in anger, but with planning. A species that valued memory above pride. The council ignored these details because they did not fit the image of a primitive race. Among the delegates sat a junior observer from an older race, one that had survived many wars. He felt uneasy. He had seen executions before. He had seen threats made and ignored. But something about the human's calm haunted him. No begging. No fear. Only certainty. The observer requested access to restricted data on humanity. His request was denied. The council did not like doubt. Far from the council chamber, in quiet human systems, the signal continued to spread. It reached places no alien had ever mapped. Old listening posts powered up after centuries of silence. Human defense networks, hidden behind civilian traffic, shifted priorities. This was not a call to war. It was a call to attention. Humans did not react with rage. They reacted with focus. On Earth, the message reached a secure command center buried deep beneath the surface. Screens lit up with the same symbol, displayed only once in recorded history. The room fell silent. Leaders stood slowly. No one asked if the signal was real. It had been designed to be unmistakable. A human representative had been executed by an external authority. This was a line humanity had drawn long ago. The response was calm. Files were opened. Old plans were reviewed. Fleets that had been listed as inactive were quietly reassigned. There were no speeches. No public announcements. Humanity did not need to convince itself of anything. They already knew what came next. Back in the galaxy at large, rumors began to spread. Independent traders reported strange energy readings in deep space. Navigation beacons flickered for a fraction of a second before returning to normal. To most species, these were minor anomalies. To those who had fought humans before, even in small conflicts, they were signs. The council remained confident. They reviewed human history using outdated data. Civil wars, pollution, internal conflict, all signs of a species not ready for galactic power. They assumed humans would protest, maybe impose trade complaints, then fall back into silence. The idea of retaliation did not seriously enter discussion. What the council failed to understand was the role of the executed human. He had not been important by rank. He was not a general or a politician. He was a witness, a living record. Humans believed that every life carried value, not because it was strong, but because it was human. Killing one was not an attack on an individual. It was an insult to the whole species. An encrypted human broadcast moved through hidden channels, never touching public networks. It carried a simple statement. No emotion. No threat. Contact lost. Cause confirmed. That was enough. Across human space, preparations continued. Supply lines adjusted. Long-range ships changed course. In the council chamber, the uneasy observer tried again to speak. He warned that humans did not behave like other young races. He reminded the council that some species survived by appearing harmless. His words were met with dismissal. The High Arbiter declared the matter closed. Humanity, they said, would learn its place. Outside council space, a small alien patrol vanished. No distress call. No wreckage. The event was logged as a navigation failure. Then another patrol failed to report. Then a relay station went silent. Still, no alarms were raised. The council did not want to see patterns where none were officially declared. Human fleets moved without lights, without signals, using routes calculated decades earlier. They did not rush. Every movement had purpose. Every target was chosen not for destruction, but for meaning. Humans were not coming to burn the galaxy. They were coming to teach it something the council had forgotten. The execution had not ended a story. It had begun one. A story the council no longer controlled. And as the galaxy slowly shifted around them, the council remained unaware of the truth. They had not executed a criminal. They had executed a message. The signal that left the execution chamber did not travel like ordinary communication. It did not use public relays or known frequencies. It moved through a network built in silence, layered beneath normal space traffic, designed to wake only when a very specific condition was met. That condition had now been fulfilled. A human had been executed by a foreign power without consent. The network responded instantly. Across deep space, ancient human stations began to activate. Many of them had been drifting for centuries, disguised as debris, comets, or abandoned mining platforms. Their power cores had slept, their systems frozen in time. Now, one by one, they came alive. Lights returned. Sensors unfolded. Long-dormant artificial minds resumed their watch. Each station received the same command and acknowledged it without question. Observation phase ended. Response phase initiated. Human engineers had built these stations with patience, not urgency. They understood that the galaxy changed slowly, and so they prepared slowly as well. The stations were not weapons by themselves. They were eyes and ears. They mapped traffic, monitored energy signatures, and tracked political movements. For years, they had recorded the habits of the Galactic Council. Now their data streams merged into a single, clear picture. Within human space, commanders received condensed reports. No dramatic language. No emotional summaries. Just facts. Location of Council fleets. Defense grids. Communication hubs. Trade dependencies. The information had been waiting for this moment. Humanity did not scramble to gather intelligence. They already had it. On Earth and its allied worlds, decision centers remained quiet. Large screens showed slow-moving indicators as fleets shifted position. No one cheered. No one celebrated. This was not revenge. It was correction. Humans had learned through their own history that uncontrolled anger led only to ruin. This response would be measured, limited, and precise. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council noticed nothing unusual. Trade continued. Delegates argued over resources and influence as they always had. Their sensors were tuned to detect threats that announced themselves. Human movements did not. Ships traveled without broadcasts, using gravity shadows and calculated blind zones. To alien systems, they looked like background noise. At the edge of Council-controlled space, a human fleet arrived and stopped. It did not cross the border. It did not attack. It simply waited. Other fleets took positions elsewhere, forming a silent ring around key systems. Each fleet received identical instructions. Hold position. Observe. Do not engage unless ordered. An automated human probe slipped into a Council communication hub. It did not damage the structure. It copied data, then left. The Council never knew it had been there. Within hours, humans understood the full command structure of the Council's military forces. Weak points became clear. Overconfidence was the greatest of them. Among the council species, whispers began to circulate. Independent sensors detected human vessels in regions previously thought empty. Traders spoke of human ships that did not respond to hails. Some council members dismissed the reports as rumors. Others felt the same unease that had followed the execution. Still, no official action was taken. A single council outpost on the frontier experienced a brief power failure. When systems came back online, nothing appeared damaged. But a message had been left behind, embedded deep in the core system. It was written in clear, simple language, translated automatically. "We are aware." No signature. No demands. Panic did not spread immediately. The council believed this was a test, a bluff. Humans had not attacked. No lives had been lost. There was still time, they assumed, to reassert authority. They underestimated the meaning of restraint. To humans, restraint was not weakness. It was discipline. Human fleets continued to adjust their positions. Supply ships moved quietly along secured routes. Medical units prepared, not for humans, but for potential civilian casualties among alien populations. This was a key rule of the response. No unnecessary deaths. The target was not the galaxy. The target was the idea that human life could be taken without consequence. On a distant human world, a memorial light was activated. No public announcement was made. The name of the executed human was not broadcast. His role was already complete. He had delivered the message he was meant to deliver, even in death. Humans honored him by doing their duty, not by shouting his name. Within the council chamber, the uneasy observer reviewed sensor data late into the cycle. Patterns were emerging. Small anomalies forming a larger shape. He requested an emergency session. Once again, his request was denied. The council did not want to appear uncertain. They had ruled for millennia. They would not be questioned by a species they considered beneath them. As the galaxy continued its normal rhythm, a quiet truth settled into place. Humanity was ready. Not emotionally. Strategically. The signal had done its work. Every piece was moving where it needed to be. No speeches had been given. No flags raised. The galaxy believed nothing had changed. That belief was its greatest mistake. The first direct contact from humanity arrived without drama. It did not interrupt council proceedings or hijack public channels. It appeared quietly inside the High Arbiter's private communication system, bypassing layers of security as if they were not there. The message carried no symbols of rank, no threats, no emotional language. It was brief, clear, and impossible to misinterpret. Return the human remains. Acknowledge the unlawful execution. Open dialogue. The Arbiter stared at the text longer than expected. No species had ever spoken to the Council in such a tone. Not pleading. Not aggressive. Simply stating conditions. The Arbiter summoned senior members at once. As they gathered, reactions ranged from amusement to irritation. Some laughed at the idea of remains, reminding others that the execution method left nothing behind. Others were offended by the word unlawful. The Council did not see itself as bound by laws it created. To admit fault would be to weaken their authority. That, to them, was unacceptable. A few cautious voices suggested responding carefully. They argued that the humans had not attacked, had not made threats, and that restraint might indicate deeper strength. Those voices were ignored. The Council had ruled through dominance for generations. They believed that any concession would invite challenge from other species. After brief discussion, the Arbiter drafted a reply. It was formal, cold, and dismissive. The Council denied wrongdoing. The execution, they said, had been legal under Council jurisdiction. There would be no apology. No dialogue. The message was sent. They believed the matter settled. On the human side, the response was received and recorded. No one reacted with surprise. The refusal had been expected. The message was never meant to succeed. It was meant to define responsibility. Human command centers updated their status. Phase 1 complete. The warning had been issued. There would be no further requests. Human fleets held their positions, still outside Council borders. From the Council's perspective, this was proof of weakness. If humans truly had power, they would have used it by now. Some delegates suggested a show of force, a patrol sent into human-adjacent space to remind them who controlled the galaxy. Others argued it was unnecessary. Why provoke a species already retreating into silence? The uneasy observer listened and said nothing. He had seen this pattern before, long ago, when another rising species had been underestimated. He remembered how that ended. Across neutral systems, independent observers noticed a change. Human ships that once avoided contact now maintained fixed positions. They did not advance, but they did not withdraw. Trade lanes near Council space grew quieter as non-aligned species rerouted, sensing tension they could not explain. Information brokers tried to gather details, but found nothing. Human networks were sealed. No leaks. No rumors. That absence itself became unsettling. On a remote human station, analysts reviewed Council fleet movements. They noted patrol increases near symbolic locations rather than strategic ones. The Council was preparing for appearance, not defense. That confirmed human assumptions. The first action would not be violent. It would be instructive. The humans chose a target carefully. A Council-owned military moon, lightly populated, used mainly for fleet coordination. No civilians lived there. Its destruction would not collapse infrastructure or cause loss of life, but it would be visible. It would speak louder than words while still honoring human limits. Orders were prepared but not yet given. There was one more condition to meet. Time. Humanity allowed the Council time to reconsider. Hours passed. Then days. The Council did not respond again. Instead, they released a public statement declaring humanity a destabilizing influence. The execution was framed as a necessary action to preserve order. The statement was broadcast widely. That was the final confirmation. On human command screens, indicators shifted from yellow to red. Authorization codes were entered. Still, no one cheered. No one smiled. This was not victory. It was obligation. Human commanders reminded their crews of the rules. No unnecessary damage. No civilian casualties. Withdraw after demonstration. Make the lesson clear and limited. At the same time, medical and rescue ships were positioned near Council space, ready to assist any non-combatants affected by panic or secondary effects. The Council never noticed these preparations. Their sensors were focused inward, guarding their pride. In the Council chamber, the Arbiter prepared to address concerns raised by minor species complaining about rising tension. He intended to reassure them. Humans, he would say, were contained. Managed. The Arbiter never finished drafting the speech. Somewhere in the dark between stars, human fleets aligned their trajectories. Weapons powered up for the first time, not in fury, but in silence. Humanity had asked once. The warning had been given. The Council had chosen its answer. The first strike did not look like an attack. No alarms screamed across the galaxy. No fleets charged with weapons blazing. The Council's military moon continued its routine operations, officers moving through halls, systems coordinating distant patrols. Then, without warning, its external sensors went blind. Not destroyed, just quiet, as if the stars themselves had disappeared. Inside the moon, power levels fluctuated for a fraction of a second before stabilizing. Confusion spread among the crew, but no one panicked. This was a military installation. They trusted their systems. They trusted the Council. Far away, a human fleet commander watched a single indicator turn green. The order was given in a calm voice. One vessel detached from the fleet and moved forward. It did not accelerate aggressively. It simply adjusted course and released a single device. The device did not explode. It unfolded. Light bent around it. Space itself seemed to hesitate. On the moon, gravity shifted slightly, just enough for trained officers to feel it. Consoles flickered. Communications failed. Attempts to contact the Council went unanswered. Still, no weapons fired. No shields raised. The crew believed this was a malfunction. They were wrong. The device activated. A controlled wave passed through the moon's core systems. It targeted energy flow, not structure. Reactors shut down safely, one by one, as if following a scheduled maintenance protocol. Weapon systems powered off. Hangar doors sealed. Every military function ceased. Emergency lights came on, bathing corridors in soft red. The moon was intact. No one was hurt. But it was no longer a military asset. Across the system, Council sensors finally detected the change. A military moon had gone dark. Not destroyed. Disabled. The report reached the Council chamber within minutes. Confusion turned to outrage. How could this happen without warning? How could an enemy act without being seen? The High Arbiter demanded answers. None were available. Then a message appeared on every Council display, public and private alike. It bypassed security with ease. The message was identical everywhere. Simple text. No symbols. This was a demonstration. No lives were taken. Return to dialogue. Silence filled the chamber. This was not how war was supposed to begin. There was no blood, no ruins to point to, no enemy fleet to strike back at. The Council's power had been challenged without cruelty. That unsettled them more than destruction ever could. Some delegates argued for restraint. They pointed out that humans had shown control, not rage. Others saw the act as humiliation. A military moon, neutralized in full view of the galaxy. If the Council did not respond with force, they feared they would appear weak. Pride spoke louder than caution. Orders were issued. Council fleets were mobilized. Patrols were sent toward human-adjacent space. Not to negotiate. To threaten. The uneasy observer felt dread settle deep within him. This was escalation, not response. He tried once more to warn them. He spoke of the precision of the human action, of the care taken to avoid casualties, of what that implied about the power being restrained. His words were dismissed. The Council had made its decision. Human Command received confirmation of Council fleet movement. There was no surprise. The demonstration had achieved its purpose. It had shown capability. It had offered a final chance. Now, the Council had chosen fear over reason. Human fleets did not retreat. They adjusted. Defensive lines shifted. Engagement rules updated. Still, no one rushed. Humans did not need speed. They needed clarity. Across the galaxy, reactions spread fast. Smaller species watched in shock as news of the disabled moon circulated. Many realized something important had changed. The Council was no longer untouchable. Others feared what would come next. Trade routes emptied. Borders closed. The galaxy held its breath. On the disabled moon, Council officers waited in darkness, emergency systems keeping them alive. No follow-up attack came. No boarding parties arrived. After several hours, power returned partially, enough for basic life support and communication. A final message appeared on their internal network. Evacuate. This facility will remain offline. Then silence. The message was shared widely. It became impossible to hide. The Council's image of absolute control cracked. In private chambers, some members began to panic. Others doubled down, demanding total war. The High Arbiter chose the latter. A declaration was prepared, accusing humanity of aggression and sabotage. The execution was justified again. The Council framed itself as the victim. Humanity watched the broadcast in silence. No one argued. No one reacted emotionally. The words changed nothing. The line had already been crossed. The demonstration had spoken clearly. The response from the Council confirmed what humans already knew. Peace would not be granted. It would have to be enforced. As Council fleets advanced, human forces prepared for a conflict they did not seek but would not avoid. The galaxy had seen the first move. It had not been fire and death. It had been control and warning. That alone should have been enough. But the Council had failed to listen. And now, the lesson would continue. Fear did not arrive all at once. It spread slowly, quietly, like a shadow moving across the stars. After the military moon was disabled, the galaxy changed its behavior. Trade ships altered routes without official orders. Neutral stations increased security. Independent worlds began closing ports to council traffic. No one announced these choices publicly, but everyone felt the same instinct. Something powerful had revealed itself, and it had done so with control. That made it far more dangerous than chaos. Within council space, confusion deepened. Fleets moved forward under orders that were clear in tone but unclear in purpose. They were told to project strength, yet no direct target was given. Human fleets remained just outside engagement range, silent and still. The council had expected panic, angry messages, reckless attacks. Instead, they faced patience. That patience unsettled even veteran commanders. Among the older species of the galaxy, memories resurfaced. Long-lived races remembered patterns. Species that struck fast and loud burned out quickly. Species that waited, planned, and limited their actions reshaped history. In private communications, elders spoke a single word when discussing humans: dangerous. Not because they were violent, but because they were disciplined. Council intelligence scrambled to reassess humanity. New reports were rushed through systems that had not been updated in decades. Analysts noticed details they had once ignored. Humans avoided alliances that demanded obedience. Humans invested heavily in logistics and rescue operations. Humans built redundancy into everything. Not just machines, but plans. The realization was uncomfortable. Humans had prepared for war long before this moment, not because they wanted it, but because they assumed it might one day be forced upon them. In human command centers, there was no celebration. Officers reviewed incoming data calmly. They monitored panic indicators across the galaxy, watching civilian movements more closely than enemy fleets. Human doctrine was clear. Fear among innocents was a failure. Measures were taken to keep shipping lanes open for non-council traffic. Human patrols quietly escorted refugee convoys away from potential conflict zones, without announcements or demands. Some alien captains only realized later that the silent ships beside them were human. The Council attempted to regain control through messaging. They broadcast reassurances, claiming the situation was contained. They framed the disabled moon as a minor incident. But words could not erase what the galaxy had seen. A core military asset neutralized without loss of life. No retaliation yet delivered. Power restrained, not unleashed. That image spread faster than any speech. On several council worlds, protests began. Minor species questioned why a single execution had led to such risk. Merchants complained about collapsing trade. Even some military officers began to doubt leadership. The High Arbiter responded with authority, tightening control, silencing dissent. That decision only accelerated the fracture. Fear, once planted, does not obey commands. Human intelligence tracked these developments carefully. The goal was not collapse. It was understanding. Humans had learned in their own past that fear could destroy societies from within. They did not intend to replace the Council through chaos. They intended to force accountability. That required pressure, not annihilation. In a neutral system near the edge of Council space, a meeting took place between representatives of several non-aligned species. For the first time, humans were invited. A single human envoy arrived, unarmed, aboard a small vessel. He spoke simply. He explained that humanity sought no territory, no tribute, no obedience. They wanted one principle recognized. Human life carried weight. The envoy made no threats. He did not need to. The evidence already existed. The meeting ended with quiet agreement. The non-aligned species would not support Council aggression. They would remain neutral, but neutrality itself was a denial of the Council's authority. The balance of power shifted without a single shot fired. Within Council fleets, morale began to drop. Crews watched human ships on sensors and felt exposed. No predictable behavior. No emotional signals. Just readiness. Some officers remembered the message left on the frontier outpost. "We are aware." They finally understood its meaning. Humans were not reacting blindly. They were watching everything. The uneasy observer returned to the Council chamber, this time with proof. He presented data showing humanitarian actions taken by human forces, evacuation corridors, medical deployments. He argued that humans were not acting as conquerors. They were acting as enforcers of a boundary. Cross it, and response followed. Respect it, and peace remained possible. The High Arbiter listened but did not yield. To accept this view would be to admit error. And the Council had been built on the idea that it could never be wrong. Pride outweighed survival. Orders were reaffirmed. Full engagement authorization was prepared, pending the next human move. Humanity noticed the change immediately. Command indicators shifted again. Not to attack. To prepare for defense at scale. This was the moment many human planners had hoped to avoid. Fear had spread far enough now that war, once unthinkable, was becoming accepted by the galaxy as inevitable. Yet even now, humans held back. They waited. They allowed the Council one final chance to see reality. The fear moving through the galaxy was not of human strength. It was of human unity. A species that argued endlessly among itself, yet responded as one when a line was crossed. As stars drifted silently beyond countless windows, a truth settled into the minds of many. The Council had made a mistake long before the execution. Not by killing a human, but by believing humans were alone. The war did not begin with a declaration. It began with movement. Council fleets crossed into contested space under orders that spoke of defense but carried the weight of fear. Formation lines tightened. Weapons powered up. Commanders prepared for a battle they believed they could still control. They underestimated what it meant to force humanity into open conflict. Human sensors detected the advance long before the first border was crossed. The information flowed through command networks without urgency. Plans shifted smoothly. Defensive lines aligned. Human fleets did not surge forward. They spread out, creating layered zones of engagement designed to slow, isolate, and exhaust rather than destroy. This was not a war of rage. It was a war of control. The first exchange happened near a dim star, far from civilian traffic. A Council cruiser fired warning shots, bright energy arcs cutting through empty space. The shots were meant to intimidate. Human ships did not respond. They altered position slightly, allowing the fire to pass harmlessly. The Council cruiser advanced, confidence rising. Then its targeting systems failed. No explosion followed. No hull breach. The cruiser drifted, weapons silent, engines unresponsive. A human vessel moved close, scanned the ship, and transmitted a short message. Power down. You will not be harmed. The Council captain hesitated, then complied. The cruiser was escorted away from the battlefield. Word of the encounter spread quickly through Council channels, undermining confidence before the real fighting had even begun. Elsewhere, Council squadrons attempted coordinated strikes. Human countermeasures disrupted communications, breaking formations apart. Individual ships found themselves isolated, facing opponents they could not lock onto. When weapons fired, human shields absorbed the impact with minimal loss. Return fire was precise and limited, targeting propulsion and command systems instead of life support. Disabled ships were marked and left behind. The pattern repeated across multiple fronts. Human commanders watched casualty reports closely. The numbers remained low. That was intentional. Every engagement followed strict rules. Eliminate threat capability. Preserve life. Withdraw once control was achieved. This approach confused Council forces. They could not understand an enemy that refused to capitalize on advantage through destruction. As battles continued, a realization spread among Council officers. Human technology was not just advanced. It was integrated. Sensors, weapons, logistics, and command operated as a single organism. Each human ship was independent, yet connected. There was no single point of failure. Destroying one vessel achieved nothing. The Council attempted escalation. Heavier ships entered the conflict. More aggressive tactics were authorized. In response, human fleets adjusted again. Defensive lines shifted closer to Council space. Engagements grew more frequent but no less controlled. The galaxy watched as battles unfolded with minimal wreckage and few casualties. This was not the chaotic warfare of history. It was something colder and more deliberate. On several Council worlds, Public fear turned into anger. Citizens demanded answers. Why was the Council losing ground without visible defeat? Why were fleets returning damaged but intact, crews shaken but alive? The High Arbiter insisted victory was near. The broadcasts rang hollow. Human rescue ships entered battle zones after engagements, offering medical aid to wounded Council crews. Some refused at first, suspecting traps. Others accepted, saving lives that would have been lost. Stories spread of human medics treating enemies with the same care as their own. This further damaged the Council's narrative of human brutality. The uneasy observer, now watching reports from multiple fronts, understood the truth. This war was not meant to conquer territory. It was meant to strip the Council of moral authority. Every disabled ship, every spared life, sent the same message. Power without responsibility was obsolete. As the conflict dragged on, Council logistics began to fail. Supply lines were disrupted without being destroyed. Fuel depots went offline through system locks rather than explosions. Fleets found themselves unable to sustain operations. Retreat became common, though never officially admitted. Human fleets maintained pressure without overextending. They allowed Council forces to withdraw, knowing that fear and doubt would travel with them. The galaxy saw the pattern clearly now. Humanity could end this war quickly. They chose not to. That choice carried weight. In the Council chamber, emergency sessions ran continuously. Arguments replaced strategy. Some members called for surrender. Others demanded total annihilation of human space. The High Arbiter delayed decision after decision, paralyzed by the reality unfolding outside. The execution that was meant to teach obedience had triggered a war the Council could not win on its own terms. As stars burned silently beyond the battlefield, a new understanding took hold across the galaxy. Humanity did not fight to dominate. They fought to enforce a rule. And now that rule was written across space in disabled fleets and unanswered orders. The war had begun, but its outcome was already shaping itself. Not through destruction, but through the steady collapse of the Council's certainty. The Council had expected rage. They had expected chaos. They had certainly expected retaliation that could be measured in explosions and casualties. What they did not expect was principle. Humanity did not fight for power. They did not fight for revenge. Every order issued by human commanders emphasized restraint, calculation, and purpose. Every move, every strike, every deployment followed the same logic. Disable threat, preserve life, enforce responsibility. That discipline confused Council officers and terrified the galaxy. In human command centers, the perspective was always complete. Officers observed Council fleets, civilian patterns, trade routes, and internal politics. They assessed risk constantly, but without emotion. Every human ship acted according to a larger plan that no single alien could see in its entirety. That gave them the advantage. The Council could react, but they could not predict. Humans had learned through history that control without foresight was useless. Control with foresight made them unstoppable. The first phase of engagement had already revealed much. Disabled ships, disrupted supply lines, and confused command structures were enough to teach the galaxy a lesson without unnecessary loss of life. But the humans understood that principles alone could not prevent escalation forever. They had to show that humanity fought as a unified species. Every human vessel followed strict rules of engagement. Discipline was more powerful than weapons. Morale and intent were managed as carefully as shields and engines. Council fleets tried to adapt. They began coordinating attacks, forming new squadrons, deploying heavy weaponry. They fired on human vessels, attempting to overwhelm numerical disadvantage. Yet human fleets responded as a single organism. Shields activated only where needed. Propulsion and navigation systems adjusted in milliseconds. Human ships dodged attacks with minimal energy use, striking back only to neutralize the immediate threat. Lives were spared. Equipment was disabled, not destroyed. Each engagement taught the same lesson. Humanity was precise, disciplined, and impossible to provoke into chaos. Across the galaxy, neutral species watched. Independent traders, miners, and diplomats noticed the difference. Human forces were not ruthless conquerors. They were careful, patient, and utterly coordinated. News spread quickly. Humans did not seek war. They sought order, fairness, and accountability. Rumors of human rescue operations for wounded council crews and civilian evacuations circulated. Every act reinforced the same truth. Humans were united, and they fought for principle, not pride. Council leadership struggled to comprehend this. The High Arbiter demanded reports from field commanders, each filled with accounts of disciplined restraint. Some officers claimed they had been spared, others described precise disabling of critical systems without casualties. The reports were uniform in tone and outcome. Humiliation replaced fear among council officers. They realized that even in victory, the humans would control the narrative. Within human command centers, there was no celebration. Orders were given calmly. Debriefings focused on accuracy, efficiency, and observation. No one acted out of pride. There were no speeches. No messages to the galaxy bragging of success. Even as they crippled council operations, humanity's focus remained singular: enforce responsibility, minimize harm, and remain united. Human leadership understood the strategic power of morality. They knew the Council's pride would make them underestimate humans repeatedly. They knew that showing strength without cruelty would cause doubt to grow among both allies and enemies. That doubt was more effective than destruction. Ships that had been powerful symbols of Council control were now disabled but intact. Commanders and crews were alive but uncertain. Fear had begun to replace arrogance, and that fear was contagious. In several Council-controlled systems, civilian populations noticed the change. Transport routes slowed. Military patrols retreated. Council messages became contradictory. Rumors spread faster than official statements. Independent observers confirmed the same facts from different locations. Human forces acted deliberately, avoided unnecessary casualties, and enforced control through discipline rather than violence. That pattern was unmistakable. Humanity's reputation as unpredictable, weak, or primitive was collapsing. Inside the Council, factions began to form. Some leaders argued for immediate surrender or negotiation. They pointed out that continued resistance would only worsen outcomes. Others demanded escalation, insisting that humans must be punished for defiance. The High Arbiter remained indecisive, unable to reconcile the unfolding evidence with centuries of pride. That indecision spread confusion down the ranks. Field commanders lacked coherent directives, and fleets became reactive rather than proactive. Human intelligence monitored all these developments. Plans for engagement adjusted automatically to new patterns. Fleet formations shifted to exploit weakness while still preserving life. Every battle taught the humans more about Council strategy. Every movement reinforced the discipline and coordination that defined their species. Observation and response became more powerful than attack. The galaxy itself began to take notice. Long-term allies of the Council questioned their loyalty. Neutral species offered tacit support to humanity, not through fleets or firepower, but through inaction, refusing to supply, ignoring orders, or quietly opening trade routes to human-friendly systems. The Council's authority weakened without a single major confrontation. Even in direct engagement zones, humanity remained controlled. Council ships were disabled, supply lines disrupted, and command structures destabilized. Casualties were minimal. Medical teams attended both human and alien crews alike, showing the galaxy that humanity fought not out of hatred, but out of principle. Stories of this spread through fleets, ports, and civilian channels alike. Humanity was no longer just a rising power, it was an example. Through all of this, human commanders maintained perspective. They did not react to insults, provocations, or threats. They responded only to actions that directly crossed established boundaries. By doing so, they enforced respect, not fear. And as fear of humans spread through Council ranks and across neutral systems, the galaxy began to understand a terrifying truth. The humans did not fight for dominance. They fought for accountability. And when humanity fought for principle, nothing could stand against them without consequence. The war had entered a new phase. Not one of destruction, but of education. Humanity did not seek victory through death. They sought it through discipline, control, and unity. And the galaxy was learning quickly that to underestimate humans, even once, would be a mistake no one could survive to repeat. The council was falling apart, though no one dared admit it openly. Fleets were retreating quietly, supply lines were failing, and morale among the crews was collapsing. Officers whispered about mistakes they could not correct, about threats they could not contain. The High Arbiter attempted to maintain order through decrees and speeches, but the words had lost power. The galaxy had seen the humans in action, and what they had seen could not be ignored. Council members argued endlessly behind closed doors. Some wanted to continue fighting, to force humanity into submission by sheer numbers and overwhelming firepower. Others argued that the humans could not be defeated through conventional means. Every failed attack, every disabled vessel, reinforced the same lesson: humans were not reckless. They were precise. They were disciplined. They were united. The Council could not simply destroy them without risking its own credibility, and that was something it could not afford. Human fleets continued their slow, methodical advance, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to enforce consequence. Every movement was calculated. Every engagement limited to disabling weapons, propulsion, or command systems. No unnecessary destruction occurred. Human medical and rescue units followed closely behind, attending to wounded Council crews and civilians alike. It was a war of principle, not rage, and the Council realized too late that principle could be stronger than fear. In private communications, the High Arbiter demanded explanations from field commanders. Reports arrived filled with frustration. Ships had been disabled without casualties. Supply convoys rerouted themselves before interception. Orders had been anticipated and countered with minimal effort. The Council realized that humans had prepared for this moment centuries in advance, building systems, fleets, and plans that were invisible until now. Every act they had taken had been deliberate, every consequence considered. The uneasy observer, who had warned the Council before, now had proof. He compiled logs from multiple systems, documenting how humans disabled ships, rescued crews, and left facilities intact. He showed how communication networks had been anticipated, how fleets had moved in ways that left no vulnerability. He tried to convince the High Arbiter that humanity could not be beaten through force alone, that surrender or negotiation was the only rational option. Once again, he was ignored. Pride blinded the leaders. Outside Council space, neutral species watched carefully. Traders, miners, and diplomats realized the pattern. Human actions were consistent, controlled, and morally disciplined. No species had ever maintained such restraint while effectively dismantling enemy power. Quietly, they offered subtle support to humans, allowing supply lines, sharing intelligence, and refusing to aid Council efforts. The galaxy was beginning to shift in humanity's favor, not through fear of destruction, but through recognition of capability and principle. Human command maintained calm. There were no celebrations, no speeches. Each move was recorded, analyzed, and executed with care. Disabled ships were catalogued and tracked. Crews were treated according to humanitarian principles. Humans understood that their greatest weapon was not lasers or missiles. It was their discipline, their foresight, and their unity. Each precise act of restraint sent a message louder than any explosion. Humanity demanded respect, and it would enforce it. Council fleets, increasingly demoralized, attempted desperate tactics. They deployed heavy weaponry, broke formation, and tried ambushes. Human forces responded with coordination and minimal engagement. Ships were disabled, not destroyed. Supply lines were interrupted, not obliterated. Each failed attempt to inflict meaningful damage eroded confidence further. Council officers began questioning orders, arguing that the war had already been lost strategically, even if it continued physically. Within Council capitals, debates raged among political leaders. Some suggested opening dialogue, offering concessions, or even surrendering. Others demanded total war, calling for retaliation and annihilation. No consensus emerged. The indecision was contagious, spreading through the ranks and into fleets. Command structures faltered. Ships moved without clear orders, exposing themselves to precise human interventions. Even minor errors in timing were exploited, leaving Council forces increasingly paralyzed. Humans did not take advantage of these errors with destruction. They reinforced positions, monitored movement, and disabled only the necessary systems to maintain control. Civilians and non-combatants were protected. Every action communicated the same principle: Humanity acted not out of hatred or ambition, but out of the need to enforce accountability. The galaxy watched and learned. The final collapse of the Council came quietly. Communication networks failed, leadership decisions were delayed or ignored, and fleets retreated without formal declaration. The High Arbiter struggled to maintain authority, but it was gone. Officers, faced with the undeniable truth of human discipline and unity, began surrendering positions and abandoning strategic posts. The Council had lost control without a single massive engagement. Human representatives moved into the remnants of Council space to conduct trials and enforce new governance structures. There was no vengeance, no executions, only judgment and accountability. The galaxy watched as humanity administered consequences with fairness, demonstrating the difference between power and control. Aliens who had once feared humans now respected them, not as conquerors, but as enforcers of a principle that even the most powerful could not ignore. The executed human who had sparked this chain of events was honored quietly. His death had not been in vain. It had alerted humanity, unified their response, and ultimately reshaped the galaxy. Through discipline, precision, and principle, humans had taught a lesson that could not be unlearned. The Council had been broken, not by rage or might, but by a species that fought with order, foresight, and unity. In the end, the galaxy recognized something new. Humans were not merely strong or clever. They were disciplined. They were united. They acted for principle, not pride. And that made them a force that no species could ignore. The Council had fallen, and the lesson humanity delivered would echo across the stars for generations to come. The galaxy was quiet now, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of understanding, of awareness that everything had changed. The Council no longer held the authority it had once commanded. Ships and stations that once projected power now operated under human supervision, not through violence, but through order. Humanity had won not by destruction, but by demonstrating principle, discipline, and unity. Their message had been clear: life mattered, boundaries mattered, and actions had consequences. Human fleets moved deliberately across former Council space, not to conquer, but to organize. Disabled ships were repaired or dismantled for reuse. Civilian stations were resupplied. Medical teams assisted wounded crews and populations affected by prior skirmishes. Every act was purposeful, reinforcing the message that humans enforced responsibility, not fear. Other species observed in awe. For the first time, the galaxy saw a rising power act with restraint and control, and the impact was more profound than any war or display of brute force could have been. Council remnants struggled to adapt. Leaders who had once ruled without question now found their authority undermined. Officers who had relied on intimidation and tradition were confronted with a species that obeyed rules, anticipated moves, and punished only what was necessary. Attempts to regain influence failed, not because of human weapons, but because humans had redefined the rules of engagement. Discipline replaced aggression. Precision replaced chaos. Humanity had shown that power could exist without cruelty, and that realization spread quickly. On neutral worlds, traders and diplomats began reconsidering alliances. The humans were not aggressive, yet their ability to enforce boundaries made them unignorable. Some minor species offered limited assistance to humans, not out of loyalty, but because neutrality alone had become a liability. Independent fleets rerouted trade to avoid potential conflicts, and intelligence networks shared observations openly. Humanity had not asked for support, but it flowed naturally, drawn by respect and fear of disorder. Inside human command centers, no celebration occurred. Officers and strategists worked tirelessly to stabilize the galaxy and ensure the lessons were learned. Every action taken by humans reinforced restraint, cooperation, and fairness. Reports from field units detailed rescued crews, restored stations, and coordinated relief for affected populations. The galaxy began to see humans not as conquerors, but as regulators who enforced consequences with reason rather than anger. Council survivors faced trials for mismanagement and negligence. These trials were conducted with fairness, not vengeance. Those found guilty were removed from power, but none were executed. Alien citizens witnessed the process, learning that authority must be accountable. Humanity set a precedent that reshaped governance across multiple systems. Decisions would no longer be arbitrary. Actions carried responsibility. Respect was demanded not through fear, but through demonstration of principle. The executed human whose death had ignited this chain of events became a symbol. He was honored quietly, not in parades or speeches, but through remembrance of what his sacrifice had achieved. His message, delivered even in death, had unified humanity and reshaped the galaxy. Leaders and citizens alike understood that his calm bravery had been the spark for a new era. Humanity had proven that even the smallest individual could change the course of history if their species acted together with discipline and vision. Across the galaxy, systems previously under council control began to reorganize. Trade resumed under human mediation. Communications networks stabilized. Governance structures shifted to enforce fairness and accountability rather than arbitrary rule. Humans did not demand loyalty or tribute. They demanded acknowledgement of responsibility. Other species slowly adapted, realizing that cooperation with humans was the safest and most productive course. Fear remained, but it was tempered by respect. Humanity's approach to war, governance, and diplomacy became a model. Military actions were now judged not only by effectiveness but by ethical restraint. Civilian populations were prioritized. Intelligence operations focused on anticipation, not ambush. Ships were coordinated like living systems, yet every action was calculated to minimize unnecessary harm. The galaxy observed, learned, and slowly adjusted its understanding of power. Humanity had not just survived, it had taught a lesson that no one would forget. The High Arbiter and surviving council members were left with a choice: accept the new order or resist and face further consequence. Most chose compliance, realizing that their previous methods had failed against a species that acted as one. Humanity had redefined the balance of power not through force alone, but through foresight, discipline, and principle. Every disabled fleet, every protected life, every carefully measured action reinforced the truth. Humans fought not for pride or territory, but to enforce respect and accountability. In the end, humanity did not claim the galaxy as a conquest. They claimed it as a responsibility. Their fleets maintained order, their command ensured fairness, and their diplomacy encouraged cooperation. Other species gradually recognized the power in this approach. Humans were respected, not feared for destruction, but for discipline. The galaxy had learned that the greatest strength lay not in firepower, but in unity and principle. And as the stars continued to burn silently across countless systems, the humans spoke once more through their actions. We are peaceful, but never harmless. That was the final message, echoing across the galaxy. It was simple, true, and unforgettable. The council had fallen, the lesson was learned, and the galaxy would never again underestimate humanity. Unity, discipline, and principle had prevailed where anger, pride, and arrogance had failed. Humanity had not only survived, they had reshaped the future for all species, and the galaxy would remember that lesson for all time.